Welcome to Alignment First, where we're on a mission to bring leaders back to their peace, presence, and power. And I'm jamming with Dr. Ruth N. Faucette, PhD, a relationship-driven psychotherapist and executive leadership consultant. Uh, a Hokie, shout out to the East Coast, Virginia Tech, where she got her PhD, and she now facilitates her research out of Arizona State. And I had the pleasure at the business club to listen to your workshop on empowered leadership. And I was like, oh, she is my people. She speaks my language. I got to have her on the podcast. So I really appreciate you making the time to be here today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Michael. I'm excited to be here.
For sure. Let me ask you this: my journey into leadership, coaching and consulting was really born of scratching this itch with my clients out of the gym, in which I've had this like wake up in the middle of the night, light bulb goes on moment where I realize that your fitness or lack thereof is really a symptom of the things you're avoiding in the other 23 hours of your day. Sure. And I just so happen to have a cohort of clients that were willing to scratch that itch of curiosity with me that has led to the depth and breadth of the work that I do now through Next Level. And I'm curious, what was that itch for you that got you in the leadership game?
Absolutely. So I will say that I have natural leadership traits. Now, that being said, right, even though you may have natural traits, there's always a learning process involved. And I came into leadership really out of my PhD program. So I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I was a non-traditional undergrad student. They always say when you grow up poor, you grow up quick. And I think that was a little bit of my story. I came from a working class family in the Northeast. Thankfully and gratefully, my parents really appreciated education. So their extra money went to sending me to private school and giving me a very sound high school and junior high education. But from then, I worked full-time. I went to school full-time for my undergraduate studies. And I wasn't entirely sure where I was going to land. I was working in a healthcare system in health information management, and I really loved medicine. I loved the fast-paced nature. I loved the demand. I loved the acuity. So I knew that healthcare in general fit who I was as a person. And at the same time, my older sister was having some mental health concerns, and she became my why. I became very, very passionate about mental health, and I actually graduated with my bachelor's in behavioral science. And so that experience in healthcare, that experience within my family system was when I really learned about the integration of what we call, biological, psychological, social, and even spiritual well-being. And moving out of my undergrad into my master's, I learned about the field of marriage and family therapy, and everything made sense. Everything that I experienced as a person was making sense. And so I got into a master's program. I applied to one master's program, got into that program, thank goodness. And then I had no backup plan. And then 2 weeks into that master's program, I learned about the field of medical family therapy. And these are my worlds, right, colliding. And I was so excited because as a medical family therapist, you go on, you get a PhD, and then you find yourself in an academic medical setting training resident physicians to provide holistic healthcare to patients. So looking again at not just the biological well-being of patients, but the psychological well-being, the social well-being, and the spiritual well-being, if applicable. And so I was very, very fortunate. I did my PhD, as you mentioned, at Virginia Tech, and I did it in a traditional marriage and family therapy program. That being said, I aligned my dissertation in this field of medical family therapy. I did my predoctoral internship in the field of medical family therapy, and then I did a postdoctoral fellowship in the field of medical family therapy. So that trained me and prepared me to get my dream job at the age of 30, which was working as faculty and director of behavioral health a dual role there at the University of Kansas School of Medicine. So I came in as a leader. I came in as a leader at 30, and I worked along 23 fantastic faculty members in a residency of 54 family med residents, teaching those residents how to assess and intervene for the psychosocial and spiritual well-being of patients. And in addition to that, I got to develop a lot of physician wellness programming, and I also got to begin training our faculty physicians, so my colleagues, in leadership development. So I was leading and I was teaching, and we all know that you learn from teaching, right? You learn to do better when you are teaching it. And so that was when I first really had my professional hat of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I've never looked back.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm curious, piggybacking on learning by teaching, what are the components within your research that you also find yourself out here in the world trusting and living into in your own lived experience?
Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure I'm hearing that question correctly. So the research I've done relevant to wellness, sustainability, how am I leaning into that as a person?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
How are you reinforcing the teaching through your living? I guess that's a better way to put it.
Reinforcing the teaching through my living. That's great. So I always say to all of my clients, I'm known for this quote: your health is your wealth. Okay. So I have been given and blessed, with the opportunity to serve some really, really incredible people who have done a lot of incredible things and have made a lot of money. But unless they are healthy, it doesn't mean a lot. Right. Without being healthy, you're not experiencing quality of life. And so for me, again, thinking about the biological, the psychosocial, and the spiritual wellness, I am adamant about, doing CrossFit 4 to 5 times a week. I am really, really mindful and intentional as to who's in my inner circle, who am I surrounding myself by, how are they improving me as a person, how am I supporting them as individuals. I'm also very intentional in my personal faith as well, and what that means and what that looks like. And in regards to the physical wellness, in addition to exercise, sleep is very important. I try to get 7 hours of sleep each night because we need that restorative sleep. And I'm very mindful about what goes in my body, the whole foods. So that lifestyle on a consistent basis, I teach it, right? And I try to walk it as well.
I love it. I love it. I'll never forget as I was stepping fully into this practice, I had an opportunity to go speak at a cash pay counseling center, 18 counselors and psychotherapists. And I was like, man, if I'm crossing any lines, I'm going to find out today. And what they brought me in to talk about was making this connection between your physical practice and mental health. And I just asked them quite simply, how many of you know you need to work out, eat better, get better sleep, drink water, and treat yourselves kinder? Yes. 18 for 18, all 5 questions, hands went up, right? It's like, great. Then I'm not here to teach you anything that you already know. But I am curious if we're looking at this model, these layers of being, that's your physical, that regulates the emotional, that clears the mental and allows you to show up as your highest and best spiritual. How many of the people sitting on your couch are you telling to move more, engage in some kind of enhanced physical activity? If you're not moving enough, start hiking, taking walks, working out, etc. And without making any assumptions, how many of you are overlooking the potentiality that in that physical practice, those folks may also be better suited just sitting still and doing less?
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, like, boom, they're like, oh, so many of them were just like, oh, wait, oh, we've been like some version of doing more, getting out of your mind and into your body type practice, and completely bypassing and or negating the utility of just getting more comfortable being with self.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, from your perspective and everything that you've done in research and in practice,
Mhm.
what lands for you when I tell you that story?
Yeah, it's interesting. So two things land. One is professional experience, one is personal experience. So the professional
Mm-hmm.
experience, you know, it, when I think about some of the clients that I've worked with,
Mm-hmm.
um, particularly when there's a presentation of anxiety, there can be too much time. There can be too much time to overthink
Mm-hmm.
and to begin to worry. And these clients who start to bring more and more structure into their lives, more purpose, more meaning into their lives, we see their anxiety decrease. And so many of
Mm-hmm.
them will say, I'm too busy to be anxious now. I have no, I'm very rarely anxious. And I love that. But to your point, right, it is about, the sustainability. And when I think about what you just shared personally, right, finding comfort and sitting still,
Mm-hmm.
that is something that as an individual, I am still working toward.
Mm-hmm.
I am the kind of person who likes everything done yesterday. And so, as you can imagine, I'm always on the go. I love checklists. That is very fulfilling. And, I have a lot of positive voices in my life. And the theme from those positive voices are, or the theme is, you can slow down, Ruth. You're still going to accomplish. You don't have to do it at such a rapid pace. And
Mm-hmm.
so, again, Michael, you were another voice reminding me of that as a person.
Well, I it's so funny. I'm not in this game for the gotchas or to put you on your heels. I really appreciate you breaking the fourth wall with me and those listening and or watching. It's always a treat to see somebody move through their practice in whatever which way in real time in this conversation. It's so cool to when and this happens to me all the time in these conversations. It's like, oh yeah, Michael, do less of that, do more of this. Like, so let me ask you this: if your pre-existing pattern, if you will, that has obviously served you really well, is to get there fast, right? At this stage of the game, where is it that Ruth is trying to get to?
That's a great question. A couple of things. First and foremost, my growth edge, right,
Mm-hmm.
is to focus on relationships before agenda. And this is
Say that.
something,
Say that one more time.
yeah, my
Relationships for
before agenda.
relationships before agenda. Okay.
That is my growth edge, and that is actually it's my focus.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have learned as a leader over the past years is I can accomplish a lot and I can
Mm-hmm.
accomplish a lot very quickly. However, for those accomplishments to be sustained, it takes others and it takes buy-in from others. And things will actually flow better when there are more people involved and more people brought into the process and bought in. So brought in and bought in to the
Mm-hmm.
process. And that continues to be my focus in moving forward is developing relationships
Mhm.
before addressing and approaching my agenda. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm taking opportunities like this opportunity, speaking on your podcast, other opportunities to collaborate, because ultimately, I want to see my business as an executive leadership consultant grow, but I'm not
Mhm.
going to do it alone. I'm going to do it surrounded by experts, surrounded by collaborators,
Mhm.
and helping me develop as I develop others.
Yeah, 100%. The one of the things that we coach through is this concept of having courageous conversations. And are you familiar with Alex Hormozy?
I'm actually not.
Okay, so he's made his bones in the fitness space, and now he's in business acquisition, and he's a thought leader in that space. And I know you know who Tony Robbins is
Yes.
because he's the guru of gurus, right? And they had a jam session. I think it was on Alex's podcast, and Tony in real time coached this motivated go-getter. My wife and I have decided not to have kids so that we can pursue this business growth, blah 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 blah. Just this very, and I, no judgment there, but just a very focused individual. And if there's anything that he's known for, it's the burning of the boats and just making shit happen, you know. And Tony had pointed out this pattern of suffering from a standpoint of if it requires no effort, it is not worth it or fruitful. Mm-hmm. And to quote Tony Robbins in that moment, he's like, "Fuck suffering," And it was you could feel the collective energy of the internet in that moment, like the pressure valve being released, like, oh, because I'm in and I'm coming to this I'm in this place now where I'm constantly asking myself the question, because I'm very much the effort guy, from sports to the Marine Corps to entrepreneurship. Everything has been driven by work ethic and effort. And that's where I found a ton of value for a really long time. And also a reinforcing positive feedback loop by virtue of, which sounds like you're picking up exactly what I'm laying down. And then I started through mentorship and coming up a bunch of circumstances where that feedback loop was not serving me in the way that it used to. Asking the question, well, what if it was easy? Yeah. And not like no resistance, no friction, easy, but like, what if you actually intentionally sought ways and means to grow without having to prove it to yourself? And I'm curious from where you sit, is that counter to a lot of the practice and the leaders that you've researched and studied?
That, I think it can be counter to that. Absolutely. I think it depends upon the culture that you're in, right? And my background is in traditional academia and also in medical academia, where it's a lot of work and you do have to do the work. You do have to do the work to pass and to get that degree. Mm-hmm. That being said, as I've moved beyond those settings and become an entrepreneur, yes, I've had to allow that mindset to shift a little bit, right? So there's still actions that have to be taken. There's still a vision. There's still a drive. But absolutely, everything doesn't have to be hard. And if we are focused and if we pursue certain avenues that are aligned with, our vision and our mission, those avenues can unfold very easily. And I honestly think about different generations, and I'm
Mhm.
a millennial, but I think if we look at Gen Zers, I think a lot of Gen Zers have it right.
Mhm.
And of course, they've had tools that we didn't necessarily grow up with as millennials. But I look at so many very, very successful Gen Zers, and it hasn't been that hard for them because they've
Mhm.
approached it differently and they've had the tools there to make it fairly seamless. And so, yes, I have embraced more that we can have huge impact, and it doesn't necessarily have to be suffering. It doesn't necessarily have to be hard to have that
Right.
impact.
Yeah. Are there practices in the culture of academia? Because obviously your research has such a deep and profound purpose. But are there practices in
Mhm.
academia that are counter to that get in the way of quality and effective leadership?
Well, I think that there are double binds, right?
Mhm. So,
There are double
define double bind really quick.
binds. So, it's there's and I actually, I've had clients come to me with this exact situation. So, a double bind is where, no matter what you do, you feel like there could be a negative outcome, right? So,
Mhm.
which direction do you go? And to your point, particularly in medical academia, things are done a certain way, right?
Mhm.
Because there is a procedure, right? There is a way of doing something, because if you follow a certain procedure, then you can pretty much guarantee the outcome, at
Mhm.
least, as much as possible.
Right.
And so you strive to do that, and you want to demonstrate competence, knowledge, and overall confidence. And that is really, especially when you're being trained in medical academia, that is what is expected of you. And to a degree, you're striving for a level of perfection, right?
Mhm.
So to be a medical learner and to potentially let that guard down as to not feeling confident, not having the knowledge, not having the confidence,
Mhm.
well, that's not going to be a good look, right? And
Mhm.
so you you're somewhat expected to show up a certain way. And that gets into your thought pattern. So when you come out, right, you're a full-fledged physician, board
Mhm.
certified physician. If you go back into the teaching setting,
Mhm.
sometimes being authentic about those experiences can be challenging, because that isn't what it's counter to how you were trained, right? It's counter to
Right.
how you showed up as a resident physician, and now all of a
Mhm.
sudden, as an attending physician, you're being authentic about that process. And that is where, and I've worked with, physicians who've struggled with that authenticity,
Mhm.
because it's the first time that they felt that they've had that space to be authentic and to be courageous in that way.
Yeah. I feel like there's an identity crisis when because you're talking to a recovering credential chaser.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, where you spent a lot of that credential chasing was born of trying to outrun uh, getting kicked out of a service academy and to
Mhm.
become so successful in my own mind that
Mhm.
that incident became irrelevant,
Mhm.
only to find out that the only person who was still hanging that over my head was yours truly, right?
Mhm.
And the other mind fuck that came along with that was, how you move through research methods and, use 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 studies to restate and reinforce the same idea over and over 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, right? only to find out when you get out into the world and you start doing the work that you've spent so long studying, it's like, will you please dumb that down for us? The only person who cares about your $5,000 words and those master's degrees is you. But if you can't communicate the idea, the concept, the teaching simply, who cares? Now you have all those initials behind your name and you still suck at your job. So it's so counterintuitive because it's almost like the world is punching you in the face when everything that you've built your identity on is almost the exact opposite of that expectation.
Yes, absolutely. I think you said it best, Michael. And yes, we call that a mind fuck. Truly. And it has been one of the biggest learning curves for me coming out of academic medicine. About 5 years ago, even 6 years ago now, it continues to be a learning curve for me. And to give that up has been soul crushing at times because that is originally where I built myself as a professional. And it has been such a professional identity shift that at times I've struggled. I've struggled with the push and the pull. But at the end of the day, I can continue to use the language that I would utilize, right, within that ivory tower, and I can have 0 clients, or as my coach, because I have a coach too, loves to remind me, Ruth, you need to speak at a 4th grade level. I can speak and I can write at a 4th grade level and have multiple clients. And so I'm playing a different game. I'm playing a very different game. And if I'm going to be good at this game, then I have to adapt. And thankfully, according to Gallup Strengths Finders, adaptability is my second to strength.
That a girl.
So I play the game.
Well, you just ripped a question out from under me because I was so curious, like, where because I get asked the question by my clients and my peers all the time, who's coaching you? Who's scrambling your brain? Who's pushing your buttons and walking you escorting you to your edges, and it makes my heart smile to know that you have both the awareness and the humility for all that you know and the impact that you've had up to this point. They're like, oh yeah, Ruth still needs this too.
100%.
Was that something that required a stretch of identity, a level of humility that you may or may not had to ask for that help and get that coach, or was it built into the program? Like, hey, oh, by the way, all of us that are doing this thing at a high level, did you just pick up on like, oh yeah, you guys have guides too?
I've always looked to others. I know that there's a lot I don't know, and especially in the world as an entrepreneur. And there are executive leadership consultants out there who are, very successful, have been doing it longer than I have. So of course I need to learn from them. And my coach, in my opinion, is one of the best in the business. Her background's a little bit different than mine, but she does similar work, and she does it on a larger scale. She's been in it longer, and she caught my attention. First, I just serendipitously met her in person at a networking event here in April of 2025. I follow her on Instagram. I needed more, I've always had different coaches, different mentors in my life. And I needed a new coach and reached out to her, and I am so grateful that I did. So for me, no, I didn't have to eat a slice of humble pie to get a coach. But she makes me eat my slice of humble pie and reminds me to check my ego at the door.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My coach I'm working with right now, she's so dope.
Mhm.
The I love the language, your growth edge, and identifying the behavior associated with that phraseology. My growth edge in just recently was, um, how long are you going to forego your happiness before you have that courageous conversation?
Mm, okay.
And it was so much less than it was so much less the X's and O's of uh, building something or offering something, and so much more an energetic exercise,
Okay.
and establishing alignment energetically before any of the tactics and strategy around it could be implemented. And I think that really speaks to what you refer to as the spiritual component of leadership. Will you dive a little bit more into that as it pertains to what you've researched in your practice with executives and leaders?
Sure. And what I will say is that spirituality may or may not be relevant to all leaders that I work with,
Hmm.
and that is something that I assess in the very beginning, right? I do
Sure.
a needs assessment when I'm coming in to work with a leader one-on-one. But what I have found is that more often than not, there is a component of spirituality. There is a belief system where leaders draw inspiration, draw energy, and really sustainability from. And
Hmm.
that is an area that I incorporate in our discussion, our check-ins, and again, it's very purpose driven. Where's that higher
Hmm.
purpose? Where is that influence coming within that spiritual realm? And how can we apply it in the work that we're doing together? And how does it show up in the work they're doing as leaders?
Hmm. 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 I want to segue because I keep staring at it.
Okay.
Uh, and I think this is really serves this juncture.
All
Tell
right.
us, tell us about, because I wrote it and made it bold in your presentation at the business club.
Mhm.
What? Tell us about the 4 Ps.
Okay, so the 4 Ps. So the 4 Ps are uh, um, perfection,
Mm-hmm.
proving,
Yep.
pleasing,
Mm-hmm. Performing.
performing. Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Fourth.
I'm
Well,
horrible at
so
lists. If there's
that
anything, if there's anything I'm good at, it's 75% effort. If you give me a list of 4 things, I'm gonna give you 3, and we're gonna play a game and figure out the fourth. So I feel you. But how do performing, perfecting, proving, and pleasing play into either enhancing or diminishing your ability to lead effectively?
oh, they absolutely diminish. Now, don't get me wrong, right? We do need to
Mhm.
focus on our performance, but if we are focused on, you know, proving ourselves, perfecting ourselves, pleasing others, we are not going to be able to perform because we are going to be so distracted, right?
Mhm.
We're going to be distracted and we're not going to be able to perform because we're not going to be able to connect with others because that perfection is going to get in the way of connection. And so the pleasing, the perfecting, the proving,
Mhm.
that just keeps you disconnected from others, where you're not going to be as successful, you're not going to be as engaged as leaders in really building and sharing a unified purpose.
Oh, I want to pick this apart with you. This
Me
is so
too.
this is so awesome. Okay, so let's talk about perfecting, because mic drop moment right there. Perfecting is keeping you from connecting.
Yes.
Let's That's a rabbit hole by all by itself. Let's go. Tell me more.
All right. So tell you more. I'm going to give you a personal example. Okay. And
Hmm.
then we can dive deeper from there. So I was a first year PhD student. So I was already a marriage and family therapist at the master's level.
Hmm.
And I had a second year PhD student supervisor. And her feedback to me was that I needed to be more vulnerable.
Hmm.
Okay. And I'm in my PhD program. And I've been doing therapy for a while at this point. I literally did not know what she meant, Michael.
Hello,
In
blind spot. Okay.
my mind, I was like, vulnerable. You want me to cry? And because up until that point, if vulnerability to me meant if I'm vulnerable, then I'm open for attack and no
Mhm.
one is attacking me, right? And that probably tells you a little bit about my family of origin.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
but yeah, I was like, ew, why would I do that? And it was
Mhm.
not until I read Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And, we love and we know Brene. And I read that 2 years later where I tied it all together. And I was like, oh my gosh, vulnerability is authenticity, right? And
Mhm.
if we're doing that intentionally, we are connecting with others because we're being authentic about our experience. We're letting that guard down in sharing um, what we truly experienced, right?
Mhm.
And we're being authentic, we're being transparent.
Can I can
And
I can I stop you really quick? Because I don't want to lose this question. Is that practice of vulnerability, as you understand it, right there in that moment, in the Brene Brown sense of the word, is that counter to what you perceived your education to be as a practitioner up to that point?
I'm going to say yes. I am
Okay.
going to say yes.
'Cause
Now,
what I'm receiving right now in your energy is like there's conflict between like this isn't about me, like the noblest of intentions, right? And if you're vulnerable, you're taking away from your client or whatever and making it about you. Is that anywhere close to the mark in terms of how you're receiving that feedback in that moment?
no, no, the feedback in the moment was not about me being vulnerable with my clients. It was about me
Hmm.
being vulnerable with faculty and my supervisors.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so going back to your original question, right?
Hmm.
Without authenticity, we cannot be leaders that connect. We can't be leaders that drive change. And so something that I always instill with all of the executives that I work with is that authenticity is the most powerful approach you can take as a leader. And we know that, right? We know that within the literature, that all wonderful, all strong, all courageous leaders share one commonality, and that is authenticity. And that is,
Hmm.
it's taking down that shield, that guard of perfection in
Sure.
an intentional and meaningful way.
And I truly believe that you and I and those that are playing this game at a high level really understand that. Why is authenticity and vulnerability, why are those two buzzwords so bastardized now? If that's the common trait throughout,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
best of the best doing the deal.
Right. What do you mean by what do you mean by that?
I feel like it is overused in the zeitgeist
Okay.
and its
Hmm.
expression
Hmm.
is oftentimes not anywhere close to what you just described.
Sure. Right. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. And there are buzzwords because they're used a lot because the literature is there, right? But
Mhm.
yeah, you know, buzzwords can get thrown out there and, truly what does it mean? And when
Mhm.
we think about authenticity, it's knowing your purpose for leading, right? It's recognizing your values as a
Mm-hmm.
leader, and it's knowing the impact that you want to have on others, right? It's those, it starts with that awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And in being authentic, it doesn't mean that you're just, spouting off authentically, what you think or what you're experiencing, but it does mean that you're showing up in intention
Mm-hmm.
and sharing, in an intentional and meaningful way what you were thinking, what you were
Mm-hmm.
feeling, and ultimately what values led to your decision, and showing up in that way of insight
Mm-hmm.
and personal reflection.
And dare I say, imperfectly perfect in that exchange.
Perfect. Yes, in that exchange. Yes.
Love that. Thank you. Let's talk. Where does proving get in the way of quality leadership?
Proving gets in the way of quality leadership. I think a lot of times because it can lead to conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're trying to prove yourself, are you stepping on other people to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Are you damaging those relationships that you have with others? And, when I come in and do conflict resolution with leaders, there is oftentimes a component of proving, right? Of being right, of being set in your ways. And it's not team minded, it's not organizationally minded, it's me minded. And, we've got to turn that me into we. I know that
Mm-hmm.
sounds super cliche, but it's true.
Cliches exist for a reason.
They do.
If
They
there was
do.
if there was a better way to communicate that message, you would have used it. So I get
Hmm.
it. I get it. Yeah. To distill that maybe and flip it, you're wanting to prove something, because I think that also goes from the, this very top down perspective, but it also I think permeates from the bottom up, from those that are you're at the table, you're in the room, you're in the conversation, and you find yourself, because of maybe uh, something self-worth ish going on in the background,
Hmm.
like, why'd you just say that? Was that necessary? Like, did, like, for what purpose did that enhance this experience whatsoever? And even
Yes.
though that was so far from your intention, that's the outcome,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um and I think the counter to that, this next P, pleasing, sounds like it might maybe the opposite of proving, or is it just a totally different lane?
Yeah. Well, I would say that proving, I think there could certainly be a pleasing component and improving,
Sure.
um, and vice versa, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that, you know, those those pleasing tendencies show up when we fear what? When we fear rejection, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we fear disappointing others. And within leadership teams, there can at times be this idea that everyone has to feel good, right? Everyone has to be happy. Everyone has to feel pleased in some, sort of way. And it's not okay if that isn't the case. And that is where you can get really webbed up
Mm-hmm.
in trying to please that you're not actually getting to that performing, right? And things can get very chaotic, and that
Mm-hmm.
vision can be lost within the pleasing.
Yeah, it seems like if we pull on this pleasing thread just a little bit more, one of the more common outcomes is resentfulness.
Hmm.
Like, because I can see it being really easy to create a narrative in your mind that you're doing everything in your power to make this a pleasant experience for everybody and everyone. And I've been that guy 100%. And then you wake up in the middle of the night and realize that everybody's winning except you in that effort.
Yes. Very well said. Very well said. It can lead to resentment because you get really tired,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, if you know your purpose, right, and you're clear on your purpose, you know your values, and you know the impact you want to have, then align your choices, align your actions to that, and rest assured on that, knowing some people will be pleased and other people won't be pleased, and that is okay.
Yeah. And we're going to put a bow on it with performing. What is it to perform? Because I feel my perception of that is to act in a way that conflicts with your authenticity, like to put on a performance.
Performance, yes.
Right. But let's dive into that last P. What is performing as it pertains to taking away from your ability to lead?
Perfect, because I've definitely been speaking to it as, effective, right? Performance. Yeah, I think that you've called it out really nicely, Michael, in that, are you authentic in what you're doing, or is it positive, right? Because you feel that you have to look a certain way or you have to show up a certain way that is inauthentic to you. And that is where, yes, performance is not not effective in that approach. And so recognizing, how are you showing up, right? Are you performing in an authentic manner, a purpose-driven manner?
Can you give me a living example of performing gone wrong?
Okay. Personal or what I've observed in others?
Whatever just came to the front of your mind, because I know it's sitting right there.
I would say, yeah, I would say, I have experienced being a leader in a setting where a lot of my performance was based on pleasing. And I was on the executive leadership team, but that theme of pleasing, in my opinion, it trickled down from the co-founder. So it, gets absorbed in the system, right? And based on that, my performance would oftentimes get paused, or thinking of this positive performance, right? Because I was trying to perform for too many people in too many different ways. That was again kind of fueled by the pleasing, which ultimately was fueled by the fear.
Okay. Yeah, because obviously, for those of you listening, these 4 Ps are not mutually exclusive to one another. I can imagine with this construct, they actually compound each other.
100%.
And they may manifest externally as one, but they're a layer upon which that manifestation is created. So in your work, how do you, and I know the answer is depends, but methodically, once you see that thing manifesting, at least so as I have them written, performing, perfecting, proving, and pleasing being the foundation of the behavior / pattern. How do you move through those layers, you obviously have to stop performing and stop trying to be perfect so that you can stop proving yourself. And then ultimately now, like, why the fuck are you pleasing everyone or trying to anyway? Like, that's the construct, the deconstruction, I guess. But like, what does that look like in practice for an individual?
So as they really strive to give up the performance,
Mm-hmm.
minimize the perfecting, the proving, and the pleasing, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Because I feel like you at least diminish those four things, and all of a sudden you're showing up in a more fully expressed version of yourself, correct?
absolutely. It
So
looks more
how,
authentic.
and if you're not there yet, how do you start that process?
You start that process with self-awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, in order to have that self awareness, you have to derive awareness from others. And it can be really, really effective to sit down with all of your co leaders, your team members, and ask for a 360 eval, because that is going to identify themes that you may not recognize as a leader and help to really call out and highlight, okay, this is when I'm performing in an inauthentic way. This is when, I'm perfecting. People are not connecting with me. This is my pattern of pleasing others, of trying to prove myself. So that self-reflection is really important, but also gaining awareness and insight from others who work with you closely on a day-to-day basis is very, very powerful. Sometimes hard, right? It's very, very powerful.
The I'll ask this selfishly.
Okay.
I'll fall on the sword here because I've been that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I got that 360 feedback, and it
Mm-hmm.
was anonymous in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And your initial impulse is, who said what? Because if you're any kind of type A, you
Mm-hmm.
know, uh, you can feel like you just got backed into a corner and you want to go like make it in the spirit of making it right
Yeah.
with whoever gave you the criticism. You want to go address it face to face,
Mm-hmm.
right? As opposed to taking it for what it is,
Right.
moving through your own self evolution
Mm.
to reconcile the criticism. How do you go about denying yourself that impulse, or at least making that impulse as
Yeah.
small a window as
I'm
possible?
glad you brought this up because we're human and oh my gosh, we have a visceral reaction, right? Getting that
Yeah.
feedback and
What do you
how,
mean I'm not approachable? What the
right?
fuck?
How dare they? How dare
Yeah.
they?
Uh-huh.
So honestly, the best thing anyone can do, sit with it. Sit with it for that day until you can take that information in and not have a knee jerk reaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just sit with it until you feel calm. And remember that no matter what, you are still
Mm-hmm.
a valuable and you are a worthy human being. This is feedback for you to acknowledge and determine how to move forward, right? What
Mm-hmm.
do you want to do differently? What can you receive from that, right, when you're regulated at this point?
Right.
And knowing that it's not personal. And I think that, so much in life feels personal because we're looking
Mm-hmm.
at everything in life from our lens. And so we see it personally. But but it's really not. Most of it's not personal. And thinking it is personal is only going to handicap you. So just
Mm-hmm.
move forward, take, what you can digest and start to adapt with what meant something and what stood out
Mm-hmm.
to you from that feedback. Again, knowing that you're not seeking to please, but you are striving to show up in a way that is authentic and connecting with others so that you continue to be a stronger, more
Mm-hmm.
effective leader.
Is a good practice in the aftermath of, let's say you have 5 team members and you have 5 pieces of feedback. I think it would be an unrealistic expectation to say that you're going to optimize for all five
Mhm.
simultaneously and successfully. Would you
Correct.
agree?
Absolutely. Mhm.
So with that, we're talking a small team, and this might be a luxury of size here. Uh, is it vulnerable and authentic as a leader to then bring everybody in at the once you're able to down
Mhm.
regulate and say and acknowledge the feedback that you've been given and address the what we would call in next level speak the next easiest step? Like, I have these 5 pieces of criticism. They're all valid,
Mhm.
right? Just
Mhm.
acknowledge their validity, because you wouldn't have it if it wasn't.
Sure.
And then say, the one thing that I can act on right here, right now, until further notice is number 3. It doesn't put any on blast. It doesn't put anybody on blast, but I think it closes the loop on the 360, because I've also seen it where you get that information and nobody has any idea what the fuck you're working on, or
Right.
what value was the exercise if nothing's going to be done. So,
Mhm.
somehow, some way, I guess that's my long-winded saying. You have to address it at some point.
Acknowledgement.
Is that a good practice?
I
Ag-
think it's a
ag-
great practice. And
Okay.
I think, it can look at a number of different ways, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
can be done, you can acknowledge it with your co-leaders, with your team members. You can acknowledge it in a team meeting. You can acknowledge it in one-on-one meetings,
Mm-hmm.
whatever seems, most beneficial or most, authentic to yourself. But yes, I think the acknowledgement piece lets them know that you have taken time to reflect. You've been sincere in processing that information, and this is your plan of action moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As you've seen that in practice, is that a quantum leap for most, or is it like, oh yeah, that makes sense, let's do that?
It's not a quantum leap overall.
Okay.
I
Mm-hmm.
Getting constructive feedback is not necessarily easy,
Mm-hmm.
but most leaders can acknowledge
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What's the disqualifying criteria for somebody you would work with? What?
ah. That's a great question. Disqualifying would be someone who lacks humility
Mm-hmm.
and someone who lacks adaptability. So the desire to change. If someone lacks
Mm-hmm.
that, then they're not going to be a good candidate.
What would be a demonstration of that in the qualifying process for you?
Mhm. Asking their why,
Uh-huh.
asking their why, asking what they want to see as outcomes.
Mm-hmm. How do you do that?
Mhm,
And I mean this in a very esoteric sense, and
mhm.
and not judge their why,
Mm,
because that's for them, not
right.
us,
Mhm.
right?
So, yeah. So I would say, it's just identifying, is their why in
Mm-hmm.
alignment with my program
Uh-huh.
and my pillars and
Yeah.
the expectations that I have of humility,
Mm-hmm.
adaptability, and application.
Yeah. I love that. The big word we use, and obviously it's the title of the show, is alignment first. You know, I would also say, to remove the judgment of it, because it's so personal and individualistic. It's like, is it genuine?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you can feel that,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know.
Yes.
I love the objective criteria that you just outlined. And also, it's like, do you really mean that? Are you building this thing so you can save the fucking whales? Like, is that
Right.
for real?
For real.
You know? And uh yeah, you are incredible.
Thank you.
And I love everything that you're putting out into the world. I applaud you for uh stepping outside of academia, because I'll tell you from my own personal experience, a lot of the reason that I stopped at why I have multiple masters and not a PhD is because I had a narrative once upon a time that if I locked myself in research, I would be a less effective practitioner.
Mm.
And that is, you have disproven that narrative. And I'm grateful that there's more of you out there.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that you spoke to that because I've heard that before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can be easy to get caught in the I'm a researcher, right? I'm not going to apply it. That being said, in my PhD program, because I was still a clinician,
Mm-hmm.
I went to an R1 university. So, research, was not even a question, not an option, and to be good research. But I was always applying what I was learning, what I was
Mm-hmm.
discovering, what I was publishing on simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, in this real world setting, I've continued to mirror that. And thankfully and gratefully, I
Mm-hmm.
have research because it supports me in what I'm doing as an entrepreneur now.
Right. Now, let me ask you this, and we can end it here. Is that becoming more and more of an expectation in research that you're out there applying it in real world application?
Uh, Not necessarily.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
I would not. No, not if you're staying within academia. I
Hmm.
don't think there's necessarily that expectation.
Got you. Got you. Well, I appreciate the fact that you're taking such a personal initiative to play in both sandboxes. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank
Truly
you.
commendable. Where can everybody find Dr. Ruth and everything that you have going on?
Yes, so I am on LinkedIn. I also have my website, Legendary Leadership by drruthfaucette.com, where you can also connect with me, book a call with me. And I would love to connect with anyone and everyone.
Cool. I've got a very short list of repeat guests, and you're
Okay.
now on it. So I look forward to
Okay.
jamming with you
I
again.
look forward to seeing you again.
Hell yeah. For everybody out there looking to become the fittest leader possible, remember it comes down to integrity, courage, and ownership. And it all rests upon the foundation of alignment first. We'll see you next time.